And welcome back to Sullivan's Backstage Pass. I'm here with Bill Mitchell. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. So I'm fascinated by the keyboard piece of the blues, right? And the reason I'm fascinated by the keyboard piece of the blues is because when you think of keyboard, you think of like traditional classical music. And so anytime I meet a blues musician that is a master of the keys, my first question is always, did you grow up with the keys on the blues? Or what was it about the blues that called you to that genre of music?
Well, first of all, I didn't start out playing the blues. When I was about 6, I started taking classical piano lessons and went through a couple of teachers, played till I was about in 6th grade, and then abandoned it to play in rock bands. And actually the formative experience of playing for rock bands in 7th grade through high school was that I met this guy named Jimmy Fetgather, and I went to a school where they had a special program for blind people. So I had a number of blind friends, and Jimmy couldn't see; he was blind, but he had an amazing gift for music. Not only did he have perfect pitch and could tell you what any note was that he heard, but he could listen to a song, go to the keyboard, and play it from start to finish. So in 7th and 8th grade, we were the very first band who was doing covers of The Doors' Light My Fire. And he taught me note for note so that I could play the organ solo on my little Farfisa clone that I had in those days.
How cool is that?
Well, and it was from Jimmy, just watching him play, that I learned the blues scale. Nobody taught me the blues scale, but and I started playing it, and later I learned that was the blues scale, or the major pentatonic, just different scales that you use in blues and other kinds of popular music. So I kind of went naive and followed my fingers from then on. Interestingly, I played in bands with Jimmy, and Jimmy was such a good musician, we needed a bass player. His mom rented him a bass, and within a month, he was one of the best bass players in town. He was just amazing at being able to hear, being able to translate that into facility, into playing.
And people like that are so amazing to be around. Like I feel that way every time I'm able to hang out with Brandon Logan, because he thinks in music.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell, like, when you meet somebody and that they think in music, it's like sometimes you just want to sit back and just watch them create.
Yeah.
Because it's like, where did that come from?
Right. So then I got into writing music, even back in those early days. And my very first song was a blues song.
I love it.
I don't even know if I knew it was blues at the time, but I every once in a while will still dredge it up and play it. And it was a one-chord wonder. It was I think it was called Everybody Knows, and it was probably, I don't remember the lyrics, but it was probably written because a friend told someone that I liked a girl, and it was it ruined the whole thing for me, or something like that. But but that was my first song, and then I did a lot of songwriting, and would kind of go away from music and come back. After the mid 70s, where I was influenced by a whole lot of different people, but after in the mid 70s to late 70s, I got involved in kind of the new wave punk scene in San Francisco. That's where I was living. So, and in those days, to put together a band, you put it on a little 3x5 card and you put it up at the bulletin board in the bookstore or someplace like that. So I had done that, and to try and form a band. This was probably in 78, because I'm an old guy. And the first call I got wasn't from someone to join my band. It was from the Dead Kennedys, who wanted me to come and play with them. They were a punk band.
How awesome is that?
Yeah. And so I hauled my 150-pound Rhodes keyboard up the stairs to their rehearsal place, and got to play a whole bunch of tunes with them, including a few of mine. But it was just not a good fit. You literally couldn't hear my Rhodes above the guitar, and they couldn't hear it, and I couldn't hear it, and so we parted in good company. And then I started to get calls, and formed a band which was known as the Informants, and we played all original stuff, both mine and the guitarist's material, around San Francisco, Berkeley, the Bay Area.
And I want to pause for a second
Sure.
and back up there, because I think just the idea of keys in a punk band is not something you normally hear. And I like, how cool is that to have, like, because, like, in a way, having keys in a punk band is kind of punk.
Yeah, well, I had a style at that time where I was experimenting with real percussive kinds of things, and that sort of was part of it. The Informants kind of segued more into power pop and new wave, so it was a really good fit there. And as I say, I couldn't hear myself over the other Dead Kennedys, so
But at the same time, what a journey, right? So
yeah.
one of the things I'm curious about, because I ask like all the musicians that come on my podcast, is about that creation process, right? Because I do believe the muse is a living and breathing thing, and you never know when she's going to visit you. So when the muse visits you, how do you capture that and turn that into a song?
Well, I do it a couple of different ways. I do a lot of instrumental things as well, and there I'm kinda just following my fingers. Back when I was a kid playing classical music, it was all eye to hand coordination. But as I kinda left that behind, and I can barely sight read, I can read chord charts, but that's about it now. Um, but when you get beyond that, it's kinda like hand to mind coordination.
Interesting.
So you're playing along, and your hands do something that you might not ever have done before, and you think, "Oh, there's something I can build on." And then in terms of the lyrics and the vocal stuff and the actual songs, that can come in so many different ways. Often it's just a line. A line comes to my mind. Like, for example, I had this line, "Too tender to touch," in my head for a few years when I was playing here in town with the Ventilators, and it took me a couple of years, and finally I said, "Oh, I know how to turn that into a song," and I kinda worked it out. But I'll either start instrumentally or musically, or I'll start lyrically.
And that's so as you're sort of in these band spheres and you're sort of picking up and you're learning the keys as well as you are, at what point did you start to acknowledge that you were actually pretty good at playing piano?
Oh, I don't know if I I don't know if I ever have. I get it when people applaud, or when people make comments, or, particularly if they're other musicians, then that sort of registers with me. But, I'm not now, nor have I ever been a pro musician. I never depended upon it for my livelihood. I I have augmented my income with it, and when I retired a number of years ago, I was able to finally say I quit my day job, you know? But, yeah, I mean, I learned so much from listening to the pros, meaning the people who make their living, on it, on music around town, whether it's Steve Caron or Louis Payne or uh, Mr. Goss, on and on.
But at the same time, though, like I don't want to discredit, like, so the reason I asked this question, and I'll push back a little bit,
Mhm,
is because I saw you perform at the Blues Jam.
mhm.
You're a professional, my friend. Like, you've got the chops, right? So I get what you're saying. Like, you're not like a touring musician, but I
Right.
also want to acknowledge the level of talent I saw on stage.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and I will acknowledge that I do stumble onto some good things from time to time. but that's what it is. It's following my fingers, and so I played, as I say, I played in kind of new wave bands, and then moved to New York City, where I actually got involved in writing music for some plays, one of which had a modest off Broadway run, and it was not musicals, but theme music and incidental music and music to kind of back certain scenes in the plays, and that
Yeah.
was incredibly satisfying. It's the only time that anyone ever commissioned a piece of music from me, so that was a nice milestone. And then I moved to Vermont, and I lived in Vermont for 22 years, and there was a lot of great music to listen to. But in all those 22 years, I played every day, but music was kind of my meditation.
Okay.
And I had a keyboard that was pre-MIDI, for those who know what that means. But it was a keyboard that had 16 digital tracks where you could store 16 tracks as if you were recording. The catch was that once you turned the machine off, those tracks disappeared. So if you wanted to save it, you had to download it to, at the time, a cassette recorder. But what I did, you know about Tibetan sand paintings?
Yeah.
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 The monks create these beautiful, intricate designs of
One piece of sand at a
colored
time.
sand. And then when it's done, they brush it all away. So that was my meditation. I would create these between 4 and 16 track tunes, and then I'd turn the machine off, and they would be gone. And I did that over and over again for many, many years.
Did any of them survive?
A few. I have one in particular that I liked enough to record it. So I have one that I've saved.
Yeah, and I have seen, and one of the things that I've said many, many, many times on this podcast is the keys are the unsung heroes of the stage. And the reason I say that is because you're lugging twice as heavy gear. it's and you're the space required, and like, so I've seen so many times that the keyboard player is the one that has to adjust the most,
Right,
because there's not enough space for you to be comfortable,
right.
if you will.
Of course, with digital keyboards, it's a little better. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend the other day who talked about how he and his band in the old days used to have to lug their Hammond players
Oh, wow.
organ up and down stairs, and so yeah. But fortunately, I haven't had to do that. Well, so then next from Burlington is Portland, and when I got to Portland, I immediately joined a garage band and just started playing. And then I went to my first blues jam in town years ago at the Vino Vixen, which used to be a wine bar down on Powell, southeast. And that's where I met the people, particularly Tom Bader, a harp player and singer, who he and I formed the Ventilators, a blues band in town, and we played together for 8 years with kind of a slightly shifting cast of characters, but played with some great people. So that was a whole lot of fun. And then I got together with Najiba Rojas, whose nickname is Jeebs, and formed the band Jeebsville, which was R&B and rock. And we played till about 3 or 4 years ago. Another great group of musicians. I learned so much playing with other musicians. I think, listening is key, right?
100%.
Yeah. It's just like a painter does a lot of looking, and a musician has to do a lot of listening. And I suppose sometimes there's synesthesia where you get a musician can be inspired by looking too. But
Well, and I always look of it as like it's a miracle in of itself. Music is in general, because you've got how many people on stage? Each of you has a different instrument or a different tool. And yet for 3 minutes and 24 seconds, you're in sync.
Yeah.
You're all on the same page.
Yeah.
You're on this undescribable mental wavelength
right.
that you don't see outside. And so I really do believe that music is its own form of miracle on stage every time. And just the fact that musicians have that ability, it's just I'm always going to be in awe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to go back though because you said you got to New York and you were sort of like on that Broadway scene. I'm curious how like the New York music scene is a little different, I would imagine, than the Portland music scene.
Oh, yeah, completely, and as I say, I wasn't really participating. I wasn't playing in bands then. I mean, I had friends who were musicians, and, in fact, a dear friend at the time was the great singer Ronnie Spector. So, so there were a lot of great musicians, but I really wasn't part of it. I was more of a listener at that time.
But what I mean by that though too is that just because I think of like the New York venues that have been there for generations
Mhm.
and just how much of a feel that must have been to enjoy music in some of those iconic spaces.
Sure, sure. No doubt.
What was that like?
Um, it was, I mean, the places like the Bottom Line, and of course you had the jazz clubs, the Blue Note, and I was really into jazz too. I've always been into jazz, and in fact, I almost listen to jazz more than anything else, even nowadays. Uh, but of course, I often think about this. Music obviously is a spectrum,
Yeah.
and in some ways, because of the way music is just all over the place. So many things fall under the definition of music. I think music shows us that no spectrum is linear. Whether it's the political spectrum, it's not just left to right, or the autism spectrum. It's not linear. It's multidimensional. And so blues and jazz are all part of the same spectrum.
And I really do believe to my core that there's no such thing as bad music.
Mm,
It's just music you like
yeah.
or music you don't like.
Oh, that's right.
And there's no wrong answer. Like if you have a band that you love and nobody else does, it's good enough for me
Right.
because it's your choice.
Right, and you can, if you're a listener, you can appreciate that even if some particular kind of music doesn't resonate with you, you can see the skill and the facility and the art, even though it might not be the most appealing form for you.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I love about the blues is that, yeah, sure, it moves us, it gets you dancing, it creates empathy. Um, but it's also can be just a real simple form. So that form allows us to play together. That's what allows us to have blues jams where we have a basic understanding of at least blues in its simplest, and people of all ages, people of all abilities can come together and have some kind of an experience. Plus, I think that simple form, the constraints allow for a real flowering of creativity.
Oh, 100%. Like just last night, I was had the privilege of seeing Curtis
Huh.
Salgado
Oh, sure. Yeah.
with just a duo.
Yeah.
And
With Alan Hager.
yeah,
Yeah.
and just like the simplicity, yet sophistication, and just those intimate shows. Like, eh, one of the things I say ad nauseum on this podcast is forgo the Taylor Swift concert and check out your local musicians and your local venues.
Yeah.
And I say that only because the sound quality is going to be so much better at those local venues.
Right. Well, and, the venues need the support. I mean, yes, the musicians need the support too, but the other day I made a list of all the different venues that I have either played at or attended regularly, and 50% of them are gone, and that's just
Yeah.
in the last dozen years. So, and then when you look at the value, the value is infinite in terms of the music, but you can pay $20, $30 for your drinks and the door fee to a blues venue in Portland to see a traveling act. You're going to pay $150 for a seat.
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm shocked sometimes when I look at that.
And when you get to the size of a venue that is required to house 60,000 people,
Yeah.
you have to sacrifice sound quality
Yeah, you do.
because you just can't push that sound quality out across that vast space.
No, you're right. I mean, even this might be a particular, thing of mine, but even the blues festival, which has wonderful acts and has provided so much to Portland over the years, for me, it just doesn't compare to seeing a blues act in a club.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, this year I went the route of instead of going to the main stage of the blues festival, I went on the blues cruise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much better experience.
Yeah.
Like depth of sound and just sort of like the intention. And actually, I'm kind of curious because one of the things that I love about the blues that I don't find in certain other genres is that there is intentionality behind volume.
Mm.
And there
Mhm.
is a focus by most blues artists of making sure that the volume isn't as such that you're sacrificing that sound quality.
Right. Right. Yeah, Timur Blakely had done some posts recently about volume dynamics, and I'm 100% behind him. Uh,
One of my favorite humans of all time.
he
Yeah.
he's done really good work. I love what he's done to support youth. I like the things he's done to support the Cascade Blues Association.
And
Yeah.
he's just a nice guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Chad's
Oh, Chad.
I mean, I've gone to Chad's jams for years, but he has a gift.
Yeah.
In terms of just making people feel welcome, whether it's in the audience or the musicians on stage, and it's
As
great.
do you though, man. Like, so like the cool part about seeing you this last time is that there was no other like real keyboard player.
No,
And
it's
so you got to play with all kinds of people who kind of went through.
yeah,
And I was geeking out the whole time because a lot of the times, like, I'm wondering how he's going to adjust. I wonder how he's going to adjust
yeah,
because every time you get a different makeup on stage, you're going to play a little differently, right?
yeah, but that's I mean, that's also it's the blues using those simple, basic forms that allow for so much creativity, you know, and yeah, and, plus I don't mind at all being I in a supportive function. I loved playing with Dawson Bellingham, which is a name folks should remember. I think he's only 18 years old, but he did a version of, Jimi Hendrix's Red House, a week ago that I thought was beautiful, and I didn't fully appreciate it until I saw the video his dad had posted of us playing it. Because I was off stage, I was able to hear what the audience heard, and I was impressed.
Yeah, and
Mm.
that's I'm always curious about that because like you talked a little bit about it earlier and about like the volume piece and the keyboards. Are there tricks for you to like boost the volume of your keyboard if need be?
Oh, sure, I mean, I could make it scream, but for example, in that performance of that one song, if you noticed as I started my solo, Dawson did this. He indicated that we should just bring it down a little bit, and we got back up to the volume by the time he was ready to sing. But I think was one effective way to create some volume dynamics.
And that's an interesting aspect too, because one of the things I always fascinated with is the nonverbal communication between musicians.
Yeah.
Was that something you sort of had to pick up along the way, or did that kind of come naturally to you?
I think you just watch other people. You see other people doing it, and it registers. It's as simple as that, really. Yeah.
And then in terms of like the live performance, I'm always curious about like the aspect of the venue. So as a keyboard player, when you get to a venue, what is there, if you could say there was one thing I wish there could be that would make your life easier as a musician for a venue?
Well, the best thing is to have a sound guy who can adjust the volumes in the monitors so you can hear yourself clearly. But, when you're playing small clubs, you are the sound guy a whole lot of times. So, you just have to roll with it. Um, yeah.
And do you prefer like when you play to have like an idea of what the set list might be, or are you all right like just kind of winging it? Because I already know the answer, but
Well, with the bands that I played in, with the Ventilators in Jeebsville, we always had a set list going in, you know. Partly because we usually had 3 hours to fill, so we wanted to make sure we had enough songs for the 3 hours. There were a few times early on where we just figured, okay, at the end of 3 hours, most of the people, especially in a bar scene, will not have been there in the first hour. So we'll just repeat some of our best tunes at the end, and no one will know the difference. But yeah,
that's interesting. Did that work?
yeah, sure,
That's
sure.
fascinating. And do you ever find like you change your sort of like the playlist based on how the audience is acting?
Oh, definitely. And that's actually one thing I learned from playing with Najiba Rojas, who's just a force of nature as a singer and has played in a number of bands around town. But she would do things like we'd be playing a tune, and when she saw that the crowd was really responding, she'd extend the tune. And I had never done that before, really. But you start doing that, or we'd also do things like she'd go out and dance with the audience. So it often meant that your 24 bar solo would have to be 48 bars or way longer. So you just keep going, you know, and I, that was I think that was easier for me to do than some people, because I had some bandmates that were troubled by the fact that she would go out into the audience. But I think, and these were great musicians, but I think they wanted to tell a story with their solo. And my goal with the solo is always to set a mood, you know.
Interesting.
So,
Was that like your always sort of like your approach, or was that something you learned over the years? Because I like that approach a little bit better than the flashy people who like take over a solo and are pushing really hard.
well, I think both can work well, but that's just my nature. That's kind of the way I approached um, soloing forever.
And one of the things too I'm always fascinated by, and I've always wanted to ask a piano player, is how do you perfect the slide? Because like when you have that and you run your keys across the hand, like I always like, how long do you have to practice that? Because you have to have a certain timing as well as how fast, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer. It just sort of happens. And of course, you got two different kinds of keyboards. You have the piano, the heavy weighted keys, and then you have the organ that is tripped just by going down just a little bit. So it's a different kind of slide. But
Interesting. So do you have to like change the way you slide based on the like piano or organ that you're playing with?
well, yeah, I think you do naturally, just because it feels different, and the trigger point of the key is at a different place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And one of the things too I'm also curious about is like the timing issue, right? So like when I talk to musicians, some musicians say that it's up to the bass player to keep time, or it's up to the drummer to keep time. Some people actually believe that it's up to the keyboardist to sort of keep making sure that we have the timing down. In your experience in all of the bands that you had, did it sort of shift, or like who was responsible for keeping the timepiece as you were on stage?
Well, the rhythm section is the drums, the bass, and often keys are part of the rhythm section. Um, but it varies with bands. If you look at going a jazz example, if you look at John Coltrane's famous quartet, really Jimmy Garrison on bass was this kind of center point, and Elvin Jones, who is doing all these polyrhythms, is often a little bit behind the beat. And as you sort of sit there and listen seriously to that, you could see that it could be difficult to play, though it opens up incredible possibilities. But John Coltrane had such uh, a strong rhythmic sense that he was able to exploit that and do things that few other people could do. He's by far one of my favorite musicians.
Phenomenal. And for those of you listening, if you've never heard that man play, you gots to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, when you were growing up and you're sort of like were in these bands and you're sort of like going with the this sort of learning progression in the piano itself, uh, what were some of your influences of musicians in the past?
Right. Well, there were a lot of them, obviously, and I didn't really have so many direct influences in the sense that I almost never copied riffs.
Yeah.
I sort of let it go through a different series of filters, but, I mean, early on, I loved Ray Charles, I loved Aretha, certainly Muddy Waters, B.B. King. In fact, my favorite concert of all time was in about '72, and Freddie King opened for B.B. King at Winterland, and then the two of them played together for the last set, and it was absolutely stunning, stunningly beautiful and emotional and all the same. But then also, in the '70s, I listened to disco music, I listened to punk, new wave, I listened to bands like Roxy Music and REM and, Kate Bush, another
There's a name I haven't
really
heard in a long time.
creative, interesting musician and composer. Um, Jazz, certainly Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane being two of my favorite people ever. And even, Japanese shakuhachi music, Indian music, I loved Indian music. Um, so all those things and how those get filtered through to whatever I do, I don't know. But I just know if you listen, it's gonna ultimately come out the other end.
See, and I love that too, is the freedom that it allows you when you have that approach. Like, because I know some musicians that are, "Oh, I hear, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and I am now gonna do everything in my power just to sound exactly like Kenny Wayne Shepherd."
Right,
Whereas opposed to some musicians were like, "Oh, that's an awesome, like, I
right,
wanna incorporate something within my own style."
right,
And you can always tell the difference when that happens.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And so when it within the local scene, right?
Mhm,
Because the local blues scene is one of those things where it's an interesting community in that acceptance and inclusivity is a part of it.
mm,
And one of the things that so from my perspective, somebody who's autistic, you live a life of being sort of like the outcast and not being accepted and just sort of not being able to participate. And one of the things that I love about blues is they don't care about your background.
right.
Like,
Mhm,
we welcome you. Like, this is about this music is for people who have been hurt by people. There's a lot of, like, emotion, there's a lot of attachment, there's a lot of history, and so, one of the things that calls to me about blues is how accepting of everybody this genre is. Have
mhm.
you kind of sort of experienced that same sort of thing with the blues scene here in Portland?
Yeah, I mean, the blues scene is really welcoming and that it means that you have beginners to world-class acts, that you can see on a regular basis locally. You start seeing some of the same people, you go to jams, you play with some of the same people. Uh, the White Eagle Jam on Monday nights has been great for me the last couple of years. I read something where this guy was asked, "What can we do to ease social isolation?" And he said, "Become a regular somewhere." And so that's what I've done. I've become a regular at the White Eagle. I don't go every Monday, but I go a lot of Mondays, and I know Janice the bartender, and I know people who come regularly. I know I've met a bunch of musicians. I even talk to people who stay at the hotel upstairs. And, it's a magnificent experience. I've sometimes I'll think, "Oh, do I wanna drive there tonight?" And once I get there, I'm so glad I have with everybody being so welcoming and so much to learn.
And the level of talent on stage is just undeniable.
Yeah,
It's the youth that are coming up, it's the people that have been there for like, such an interesting collection of levels of talent
yeah,
that sound awesome on stage.
yeah.
Yeah.
And a bunch of great people, really interesting to talk to, though I probably do less talking than I might if I weren't playing much of the night, but yeah.
But though at the same time, though, it's one of those spaces where, uh, y you can go just to have fun.
Mhm.
Like, there's no expectations, there's no sort of, like, you know, I it's the part I love about a jam, and will highly recommend that people, even if you aren't musicians, to
Right,
go to a jam,
right.
is the musical freedom that you have on the stage.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like, you're trying things out, you're trying new
yeah,
songs, you're, like, collaborating,
yeah,
and because like, one of the things that I saw the other night is when somebody brings up a song and nobody else really knows it, and then numbers come out,
yeah.
and everybody on stage, they hear the numbers, like, "Oh, okay, I can do this because I have the sort of basics."
Right.
So for those people listening who may not be in the know, what are those numbers being shouted in the back of the stage?
Oh, okay. Well, basically, they're the numbers of the chords in the sequence, the root note. So you have the 1 chord is the root of the scale, the 4 chord is the 4th, based on the 4th note of the scale, and the 5th is the based on the 5th, and you have passing chords in between those. But that's what they're calling out. They're just telling you what chord, in case it deviates from the simplest blues, format.
And the part I want people to know is that that's all you need as professional musicians to get a song.
Well, yeah, that's certainly the basic part anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you can develop from there, but again, that's why the blues forms are wonderful because they're accessible, but they also allow for an amazing amount of creativity.
You keep the bare structure in
Mhm.
place,
Mhm.
but then you can add all of this other stuff
Yeah,
around it.
yeah.
And as long as you have the basic structures, you have the freedom to play on all kinds of things.
Yeah, that works, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And was that something that how did you pick up the blues progression, though? Was that something you had to teach yourself along the way?
Oh, well, mostly, as I mentioned, this fellow Jimmy Fetgather,
Yeah.
watching him play tunes, and it sort of all came together. It was probably a few years later that I realized what things were, but that's where I learned the 1, 4, 5 chords and that sort of thing, was just watching him play. In fact, it I was thinking about him this week, and I had not been in communication with him since, high school, but I did look him up online, which you can do nowadays, and he and I exchanged emails. He's living in Reno, Nevada, and just retired himself recently, but he still plays music, so
That's so awesome.
yeah,
Like, the fact that we can connect in those ways these days
yeah,
is just phenomenal.
yeah, yeah.
And then in terms of, like, the venue and live performance, right? One of the things that I'm always curious about, because I can't ask this question enough, because there's still this misconception out there. At the end of a performance, do you want the audience to come up and let you know that you did a good job?
Oh, if, they don't have to, but if
100%.
somebody wants to, that, I mean, in fact, you never really remember. I mean, you experience the applause, love it when people dance, that's all feedback, and you experience that, and that's great, but the things I really remember are those people who come up and say something, you know, uh one young woman said to me once, "I could watch you all night," and what she was referring to was the fact that I chew my tongue when I play. So I kind of have, to get this intense face. But then I've had other people, like this one young guy came up to me after a festival down in Southern Oregon and said, "Your piano playing, keyboard playing makes me so happy." And, you know, so I remember that. Yeah, there was some applause then, but that really, it means you resonated with one person. And it's not a numbers game. It's quality. So yes, it's meaningful when someone makes a comment like that.
And the reason I bring it up is because I actually will hear people in the audience say that they want to, but they're afraid the musician doesn't want them to. And so
Oh,
now I go on a tyrant, and so everybody listens to this podcast knows, yes, please go up to your local musician and let them know if you've enjoyed the show.
yeah.
Because 99% of musicians that I know are not egotistical maniacs who will push you away at the end of the performance.
Oh,
Most
right.
musicians are going to be like, please come talk to me.
And sometimes that comment is surprising and in
Yeah.
a very pleasant way. I make an effort myself when I'm listening to a band, even the house band before a jam, to tell people what I really loved about their performance.
Yeah, because it's a way that's that real feedback that allows an artist to keep doing what they're doing well.
Yeah.
And that validation of all of that hard work. Because it's not easy getting on stage. It's not easy getting the experience necessary to put on a show. And so anything that we can do to support musicians for that hard work, I say do it.
Plus, it's good for the person who makes the comment because you
Yeah.
make a connection,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
even if it's brief.
Yeah. Oh, so many times where I've gone up at stage and said, I love how you played. And then I find out that they're in 3 other bands. And now I have the opportunity to see this performer in 3 different types of venues
Right.
in different genres. But if I hadn't gone up and talked to them after the show, I would have never known.
Yeah.
And that's another opportunity as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of like the performance itself, right? So like when you're playing on stage and you're looking out at the audience, what are some of the things that you're looking for that shows you the audience is in tune with what you have going on?
Well, typically on stage, you can't really see the audience very well because the lights are kind of
So
blinding you.
bright.
You have a sense of them. If they're dancing, that's the one thing you can't see, and there's nothing more fun than playing for a group of people who are dancing and really getting off on it, and, I kinda dance on my piano bench because it just feels good, you just go with the music, whatever the drummer's playing, whatever the bass player's playing, you try and feel it and move with it just a little.
Well, that pays off though,
Yeah.
it when you see a musician feeling the music that they're putting out there, I think it leads to a much better performance. So like was that something you sort of practiced along the way, or did like the musicality and like the moving around always was like a thing?
Well, it wasn't always a thing because when I was younger, I was nervous. And had to kinda overcome nerves, but, I don't have that issue now, and so I just go with the music. It's just completely natural. And sometimes I know it looks pretty goofy, but it's
It
hey.
does not, my friend. It does not.
Okay.
No, it does not. It lends itself to an amazing show.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it does. 'Cause it's one of those things where like you can tell when a musician loves what they're doing.
Mhm.
And when
Mhm.
you have a musician who loves what they're doing and they're up and playing because they love what they're doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a different experience altogether.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And so like when you're up there and you're on stage and have you ever lost a key? So like like a guitar string breaks or like you may lose, like has there ever been like a power failure on a keyboard where you lost one key or anything like that? I've always
Well,
been curious.
yeah, we were playing at the Mock Crest, Jeebsville was once, and I don't know exactly how it happened. I think someone bumped a nearby table, and it's a pretty crowded little bar, and a whole glass of water flew,
Oh no.
and landed on me and my keyboard, and literally took out the bottom couple of octaves. Just the contact strips were wet, so it stopped playing. I finished the song, but it was right-handed at that point.
How do you fix that, or can you fix it?
Oh yeah, you can, but it takes some money and a trip to the shop. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things too that I'm curious about too is with the keyboard and the different sort of music options that they have. Uh, do you find that the newer keyboards have a similar sound to the ones that were made like 5, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, different sounds are current at different times. But the newer keyboards, the newer digital keyboards, the Nords have every sound, every classic sound is there, or at least available, because you can download tunes. But I recently just got a straight piano, electric piano, just to have that, and I always went for the beautiful sounds, of those classic instruments.
Do you remember the first piano that you played?
Yeah, it was a little spinet that my parents bought so that we could take piano lessons. Yeah.
That's cool. So you took piano lessons like as a family?
No, but both my mother and father played a little bit. My father was actually a drummer, but he could play some boogie woogie on the piano, and he played, and everybody in my family took music lessons. So, one sister played violin, the other played the flute, and I played piano and clarinet for a few years.
What was it why did you start on the piano? Was that your parents' choice or did you choose?
I'm not sure. Well, they bought a piano, and it just sort of made sense. I mean, I was only 6 or 7,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. So 6 and 7 and you start with the sort of like you were saying, playing with your hands and not your heart.
Well,
Classical kind of music?
yeah, oh, yeah, classical music, and, I got decently good at it. I had graduated to a new piano teacher about a year before I quit, and she and her husband, were both piano teachers and had 2 Steinway concert grands in their living room, so not much room for much else.
Yeah.
And she was a very intense, teacher. I can't remember her name at the moment, but she was very intense, but I managed to play through the intensity and learn quite a bit from her. But as I say, then after that, I went into rock bands and never looked back.
So when you went into rock bands, did you always like play keys in the rock bands?
Yeah, yeah.
Eh,
At first, I had to play. My dad had a little tiny accordion, and that's the only thing I had other than the piano. But we were playing around in different people's garages to start, and so I carried that around. And then I was able to talk my father into taking a little bit of money out of my college fund to buy me this little Italian Farfisa clone. I think it was Porto was the name of the organ company.
How cool is that?
So yeah, so I had that. Yeah.
And the fact that your parents were supportive enough to actually go for that too, like that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, well, it was my father. He was kind of a frustrated former musician himself. He used to play drums in kind of jazz bands. So,
Interesting. And then as you progressed through these rock bands, did you find it difficult at first to find a band as a key player in the rock as a keyboard artist trying to get into the rock scene?
no, because I mean they were all bands that I helped organize. So
Ah, okay.
so
Yeah.
friends and I would play together, and yeah.
Because like one of the things that you don't normally see are keys in hard rock.
Well, not in hard rock, but certainly,
Ah, okay.
yeah, but certainly, I mean, we were just doing covers at first, and then myself and some of my bandmates tried our hand at writing songs, and pretty soon that became a larger percentage of what we were playing.
Yeah, because for anybody out there, making a song out of nothing is one of the hardest things to do.
Maybe, but it's never out of completely nothing if you're especially if you're working in a particular genre or exploring the edges of a genre, you've got some forms to work with. You got some
100%.
building blocks.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I guess what I'm trying to stress upon people is that if somebody has taken the labor-intensive task of creating a song and putting it onto an album,
Right.
just recognize how much of a time commitment
Oh, yeah.
and how much work it took
Yeah.
to get from point A, I have this idea, to here's a CD.
Right.
It's a
Right.
huge effort.
Oh, yeah. And I think I mentioned to you on the phone a while back that, one of the things I focus on now is homemade recordings. And they're pretty raw, sometimes medium rare,
Yeah.
sometimes in that range, often unfinished. Like there'll be virtual drum tracks that to make a perfect recording, I'd go to the studio and replace them, but it's enough. The idea is there. It's with varying degrees of completion. It's like part of my musical sketchbook, and that's a few of the things that I've released under the name Chill with Bill, which is not really a band. It's just a vehicle for identifying songs that have been created with that homemade approach.
Which I appreciate a lot. Like I almost like sometimes you hear those albums that are overproduced,
Right.
and I am always searching for raw and unsort of filtered. It's what I love about live music versus studio music.
Mhm.
I there are my artists that I prefer listening to their studio albums. Um,
Sure.
but that's because their concerts aren't accessible unless you're financially well off.
Right. Exactly.
But every time I get a chance to go to a live show, and I know it's not going to be the same. Like you're not going to see the same set list by Chad Rupp every Monday night. Like no, it's going to be different.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to convey to people is the importance of local musicians
Mm. Mm.
because of the level of performance you're gonna get
Mhm.
every single time,
Mhm.
and, I'm always I guess I can't say I'm surprised because I'm not surprised, at the same time,
Uh-huh.
every time I go to a live show and I see something like when Johnny Wheels pulled his magic volume trick out of his butt and turned the volume of everything down
Mhm.
except for his voice.
Mhm.
And it was just one of those moments on stage, it's like, "Oh, I didn't see that coming in that
Uh-huh.
song."
Uh-huh.
And that you're never gonna see that again.
Mm.
And how cool is it that you're there for that snapshot of
Mm.
time
Mhm.
to see something you'll never see again?
Mhm.
And I would imagine on the musician side, that's gotta also be awesome, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Though, I find that I don't always know at the moment, you know, you might see someone has made a recording of what you did, and you hear because you on stage, especially in a club, in a small venue, you don't always hear anything that's real close to what people hear out on the outside out on beyond the stage. You might hear your own part because 'cause you've got it tuned in the monitor, so you at least know what you're playing, but you don't get the full sonic picture unless it's, a club with a sound man or sound woman, you know?
Yeah, because like, if you think about it, like, it's like all of the speakers are facing the audience, like, all of the major sound, like, the main mix is different than the mix you're gonna get as a musician. So, almost like by design, you're hearing something completely different just so that you can hear yourself and play.
Right, and particularly at the smaller venues, but it's just something you roll with and learn to adapt to, but it is also it argues for recording your music so you can see what you actually sounded like.
Yeah, yeah. Do you spend a lot of time listening back to what you've played to sort of get an idea?
Yeah, and especially when I do, but especially when I'm writing music. I'll develop a thing and I'll listen to my music over and over again. And it's partly because I create the music I wanna hear. I mean, that's kind of the way it works for
Yeah.
me. But also, you just get ideas, you know? You get ideas, uh, you can figure new approaches, you can add instruments, all those kinds of things.
And then in terms of like the post, so I guess a question I would be curious about in terms of the piano itself, is it ever the case a piano, especially like an electric piano, goes out of tune?
No, not
I didn't think so,
no,
but I was just always curious.
no. I mean, if you go back to, like, the Rhodes, which is instead of piano strings, it's a little tine, and you have to tune those, and and that can that can be time consuming because each one
Interesting.
is a little tuning process, but, and, have 88 keys on those, so it was but with the digital there, it's all stored. Unless and maybe there's some malfunction that can cause it to go out of tune, but I'm not, uh, technically savvy enough to know about that.
So we've been at this for about an hour.
Have we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess how to wrap things up, where can people go to find your music?
Well, Chill with Bill there's a few songs on all the streaming services, YouTube Music has it, Apple Music. You sometimes have to search for it, but Chill with Bill is where you can find my homemade mixes with a few guests accompanying me.
I love everything about that. And please, if you haven't had a chance to go check him out at the Blues Jam at the White Eagle on Mondays, get a chance. It's quite something. Yeah. And I guess we'll leave the podcast the way I always leave the podcast, folks. Be kind. We all live on the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world would just be a little bit of a better place if we treated everybody with a little kindness and respect.
Here, here.
Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.